Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar. Hola y bienvenido a nuestro seminario de web. This event is being simultaneously translated into Spanish. Este evento está siendo transmitido en español. To access that feature, click on the interpretation button at the bottom of your screen. Para acceder a este servicio, favor de oprimir el botón abajo de su pantalla y seleccionar el botón para español. We thank Rafi Mata, who is offering our audience live Spanish interpretation this evening. Le damos las gracias a Rafi Mata, quien nos brinda la interpretación al español esta tarde. I'm going to let Rafi take the interpretation from here. Other Zoom logistics as you all come in and join us, and welcome to those who are just joining. We invite the audience to submit a question using the Q&A function available at the bottom of your screen, and questions are going to be tackled at the end of the webinar. In addition, we're going to be inviting you to answer a couple of polls that we'll be launching over the course of the webinar. So please get ready to interact with us over the next 90 minutes. I also want to let you know that this webinar is being recorded and it will be made available on demand on our website by next week. With that, as we have more folks joining us, I want to just briefly introduce myself. My name is Renee Champ, and I'm the director of the Napa-Sonoma ADU Center. I'm a lawyer by education and a nonprofit leader by trade, and I am a native of Sonoma County. And I actually grew up here, as did my husband. And we now live in an above garage ADU on my mother's property in West Sonoma County. I believe in a future where every person in Napa and Sonoma counties can afford to live and thrive here. And that's what the Napa-Sonoma ADU Center is all about. I'm joined this evening by many wonderful folks, and I'll be introducing you to them throughout the evening as panelists. I also want to say a special thanks to Amity, our admin support superwoman, who's taking care of all of the behind the scenes Zoom logistics for us tonight. So thank you so much, Amity. Okay, this webinar is actually part 2 of a 2-part series focused on accessory dwelling units in Healdsburg. It's also going to be relevant for folks outside of the city of Healdsburg. Part 1 actually took place back on March 4th, a couple weeks ago, and it's now available on demand as a recorded version on our website. That Part 1 webinar was in partnership with the city of Healdsburg, and it featured your very own local planning and building staff. So a senior planner and building official from the city of Healdsburg. On the other hand, this Part 2 webinar that you're joining us for this evening is in partnership with the local nonprofit Healdsburg 2040. And this particular webinar is going to feature local housing professionals and homeowners who have successfully built ADUs in Healdsburg. And I should also just note that because Part 1 was focused on partnering with the city of Healdsburg and featured panelists who were planners and the building official in the city of Healdsburg, it really got more into the nitty-gritty of the local ADU rules in Healdsburg, development standards, fees, all of those questions. So if you have questions about that, we're not going to be tackling those questions tonight, but you can go back and watch our recording of the webinar. And there's also a list of the local Healdsburg ADU rules, plus a link to the city's website on ADUs on our website. So both of these 2 parts of this webinar series are going to be, again, recorded and available on our website on demand. Okay, so a little bit about our agenda for the evening. We're really excited to have you all join us. And we're going to hear a little bit first from the nonprofit Healdsburg 40 that partnered with us on this webinar. And then I'm going to share with you a little bit about our nonprofit, Napa-Sonoma ADU Center, and about accessory dwelling units. Then we're going to hear from our ADU expert and also a local architect about building ADUs in Healdsburg. And it will be relevant to folks who are interested in ADUs outside of Healdsburg as well. And then we're going to hear from 2 local homeowners who have successfully built ADUs in Healdsburg in addition. And then at the end, I'm going to go over some FAQs and kind of resources for you. And then we're going to launch into our live audience Q&A. And that's going to be really fun. We're looking forward to hearing your questions and getting to tackle some of them with you this evening. So before we do that, I do want to just pull up one quick poll here on what your ADU goals are. So we would love to hear from you. You can pick multiple. We find a lot of folks often have both short and long-term goals for their accessory dwelling units. It might be rental income, housing for a family member, helping out the community, planning for retirement. Go ahead, answer as many as are relevant. I'm going to be quiet for a minute so you can look through them. Scroll through to the bottom and hit the submit button when you're done. So go ahead and let us know what your ADU goals are. And we'll see the responses coming up here in a minute. So you can see 2/3 of you are interested in building housing for a family member. We see that really often. That's very common. Over 50% in rental income, 60% planning for retirement. And you can see the other results there as well. Thank you all so much for answering our poll. We really appreciate it. And over half of you answered that. So thank you all so much for participating. With that, I'm going to pause for a second and hand it over to Tim, who is going to share with you a little bit about Healdsburg 2040. So Tim, feel free to unmute yourself and turn on your video. And you're going to hear more about Tim's bio later on this evening, but he is a member of the nonprofit Healdsburg 2040 and is just going to share a few words about the organization. So Tim, if you want to unmute and turn on your video and join us briefly. And if Tim is having issues, maybe Ken can chime in.
Well, I think you can hear me, Renee, but
oh, yes, I can.
Great. I'm having a little video issue here, which we'll resolve.
Oh, that's fine. There you are.
Okay. Perfect. So Healdsburg 2040 was inspired by the Sustainable Design Assessment Team, or better known in the acronym SDAT. They visited Healdsburg in August of 2018. And Healdsburg 2040 is actually a group of interested citizens, which are now an offshoot of that Sustainable Design Assessment Team visit. We number now 150 active members, and we are operating in 4 self-managed work groups focused on arts and culture, housing, general plan, master plan, and parks and connectivity. And if you'd like to see a list of who the members are, you can go to healdsburg2040.org. Thanks a lot.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tim. And Napa Sonoma ADU Center is really grateful to Healdsburg 2040 that we've gotten to partner with you on this webinar. And if you all in Healdsburg aren't familiar, I hope you check them out. They're awesome. All right. Thank you, Tim. Now I'm going to tell you, and I'll let you just mute yourself and turn off your video, Tim, when you have a chance. The Napa Sonoma ADU Center is another nonprofit here in Napa and Sonoma counties. We're actually a fiscally sponsored project of Napa Valley Community Foundation with support from Community Foundation Sonoma County. And we just formally launched with my hire this past April. So we're about to hit our 1-year anniversary. We really hit the ground running, and we have so much more that we're excited to do. And as you can see from our collaboration with Healdsburg 2040, collaborating with local nonprofits, with residents, with local jurisdictions, as we did with the city of Healdsburg in part 1 of this series, and with the private sector is really important to us as an important piece of our goal of increasing housing affordability in our community. Let me tell you a little bit about some of our key resources that we have available to homeowners interested in building accessory dwelling units. This is a long list of them, and I'm not going to go through all of them because they're available on our website, but I am going to just highlight a few key resources that I want to make sure you're aware of. First of all, we have our ADU workbook, and this is just walking homeowners through A to Z, the entire accessory dwelling unit process. So Amity is kindly pasting into the chat there for you links to these tools as I name them. So if you want to copy those and paste them so you have them saved for after this webinar, feel free. Otherwise, if you go to our website, you'll easily locate them on the top menu under the resources dropdown. We also have an ADU calculator tool. This is a really helpful way for you on the front end to estimate the cost, return, and benefits associated with building an ADU. And I highly recommend you check that out. You can specifically input Healdsburg or whatever city or unincorporated county you're based in that calculator to get a specific budget estimate for your ADU project. And then finally, we have an address lookup tool, and this helps you identify if you can build an ADU on your property. For many of you, thanks to the state laws that came out in January 2020, the answer is going to be yes. A little more about our services. We provide direct support to homeowners. You can reach out to us, as you see on this slide, either by phone or through our Contact Us button in the upper right-hand corner of our website. Link is also going to be provided to you this evening. And reach out with any ADU questions that you have. We have the pleasure of collaborating with local jurisdictions across Napa and Sonoma counties, including the city of Healdsburg. They also help us make sure that we get you accurate information and we can answer your questions throughout your ADU journey. We also do ADU feasibility consultations. These are totally free, and our focus is on just doing pre-screening research on your parcel. Then we do a site visit with you, and we get you a 25-page customized report that walks through what your ADU goals are and really is custom advice for you on what your next steps should be and the type of ADU that makes the most sense given what your goals are, etc. So I'm actually quite excited for you to meet our ADU expert later this evening, Scott Johnson, who does those ADU consults. And I think you'll really enjoy getting to meet him. And if you're interested in getting customized advice that's a deeper dive to catalyze your ADU project as step 0, we like to say, on the process, you can go ahead and sign up at that link that we've dropped there in the chat really easily through our website. So a little bit about the ADU process overall, just to orient you in case this is new to you. We're going to do a deep dive into the design elements and talk a little bit about the experiences of 2 local homeowners in Healdsburg who have gone through this whole process map already successfully. And just to let you know, again, Napa Sonoma ADU, we offer folks help at that pre-development stage as our deepest dive of services. We really want to help you have realistic expectations up front from, again, day 1 on budget estimates, on our recommendations for the ADU type, cost drivers, and just what their next steps are going to be to get successfully through that full ADU process. So with that, I am going to have Amity pull up another poll to hear a little bit more from all of you. And then we're going to get to hearing from some local housing professionals. So we'd just love to hear from you. What ADU work do you look forward to? Are you interested in designing a floor plan, selecting finishing materials, planning green or eco-friendly building elements, landscaping around the ADU, interior decor once the project is done, or just really interested in getting that project wrapped up so that you or a family member, a friend, or a tenant can move in? So feel free to let us know there in the poll what ADU work you're most looking forward to throughout that ADU process. And I'll give you a moment to read through those options and answer. So 65% of you are excited about designing the floor plan. I am so glad you're here with us this evening. We are just about to talk about that with our housing professionals this evening. And I couldn't agree more. I think it's so fascinating to think strategically about designing for small spaces in particular. Almost 50% of you planning greener, eco-friendly building elements. We love to hear that. 60% of you are interested in the move-in. Couldn't agree more. That is the ultimate goal here. Thank you all so much for answering. That's really helpful to hear from you what you're interested in as we go through the rest of our content this evening. So thank you. Okay, with that, we are going to hear from some local housing professionals with excellent experience with accessory dwelling units. So with that, I want to invite Scott and Kenneth to unmute yourselves and turn on your videos. Amity is going to paste their bios here into the chat. But in short, Scott Johnson, who I mentioned earlier, is the ADU expert at Napa Sonoma ADU Center, and he's also the founder of Pocket Housing LLC. And he has a lot of experience with the full ADU process. And again, he does those ADU feasibility consultations and also helps us get accurate information to homeowners who reach out to us with questions. And then Kenneth Munson is an architect based out of Healdsburg with excellent experience designing accessory dwelling units in the city of Healdsburg. And he's also a member of the nonprofit Healdsburg 2040. So with that, if you two are ready, I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to you to share more about design tips for ADUs.
Thanks, Renee. Like she said, Ken and I are going to spend some time talking about things he's discovered that really make ADUs come alive and make them into really beautiful, livable spaces. And so I know, Ken, you've got a lot of information to share with us, particularly with the emphasis on designing storage spaces and for ADUs.
Yeah. Good evening, everybody. We're just going to kind of run through. I'm going to try to highlight a few design principles first that are things that I think that everybody should be thinking about, and you will be thinking about when designing your own ADU. And then we'll move on to some slides to point out some of those items. But these are kind of design principles that you should consider, in my opinion. High ceilings. You don't have to have an 8-foot flat ceiling. Vaulted ceilings really open up a space and make those smaller spaces, our ADU spaces, feel a lot larger. Long sight lines. It's really helpful to put windows on those outside walls so that you can look through them and connect to the outdoors. It opens the space up. It feels much larger. Long-term storage. ADUs are smaller spaces, but people still have their stuff. So you've got to create places in the ADU to store your stuff. And otherwise, maybe you may need to consider doing a shed elsewhere on the property, or storage in a basement, or storage in a garage. If you have, French doors, or make a nice, entry out into a backyard, letting light in and connecting that outdoors to the inside. Things like a great room, it takes the individual spaces. Like in your normal house, you might have a kitchen area, you might have a dining room area, you might have a living room area. Well, a great room is combining all of those so that they make better use of the space. They are able to share space without your eyes being stopped at walls. Stacking functions is another thing to consider. There's some great configurations of contemporary furniture, like Murphy beds, for instance, that when the bed is folded up, it provides a couch, or there's a table that folds out, and then the bed can fold down. Stacking functions like that is really helpful. Also, if you are doing a 2-bedroom ADU, one of them could be an office and the other could be a bedroom. Acoustic privacy, if you're doing a small studio, it's really tough to get acoustic privacy because it's all one room with the exception of the bathroom. But that is something to consider. You might have a loft and you may want to enclose that area, again, for acoustic or a bedroom acoustic privacy. If you're a couple, one person wants to sleep and one person's working late, that acoustic privacy could be really important. Staircases, depending upon how they're laid out, they play a crucial role in the layout of your ADU. And the last one is really a consideration that doors, most of us are used to swinging doors. Well, there's also pocket doors, and the advantage to a pocket door is that you're not taking up floor space as that door is swinging open and closed, having to leave it clear. So pocket doors can be really helpful. Just buy the better, the most expensive one you can get, because they're acoustically, they're a little bit better and they last longer.
And you've got a number of slides that show projects where you've incorporated a lot of these ideas that you're going to show us tonight, right?
Yeah, yeah, we'll touch on a number of these items that I mentioned, and every client, every circumstance is different. So these are kind of fun because these are 4 different clients and 4 different sizes. So this this slide here is actually a working drawing of that previous slide. So this is the first ADU that I did in Healdsburg back in 2000. And this was 640 square feet because at that time that was all that was allowed. But it's a 640 square foot ADU. We converted a barn and added on to this in town. And what it's showing is, let's go ahead and go to the next slide. What we're doing is that we're sharing spaces. So I've got windows located on both sides, actually all 4 sides ultimately of this space. This picture is showing it's a small dining space. We bumped out, we created a bench seat. There's storage under the seat. And this is letting in a lot of light. This is a shed dormer, so it's a tall wall of glass. And you're able to look out right into the trees. It's beautiful.
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting design for 640 and a conversion of an existing space, which some people when they think about converting and outbuilding, they tend to look at the envelope as being fixed. But I think this was a brilliant move on converting the barn by going up with that window. It really opens the space up. It's really dramatic, particularly in 640 square feet, to have that much window in one wall, and it brings in a lot of the outside to the inside. And this is one of your designs that sort of has a great room kind of layout, right? Because where the kitchen and the dining space are semi-combined.
Yeah, that dining space in that previous slide is right to the left of this slide that you're looking at now. And this also shows a condition where the main residence is off to the right, and we didn't want to have the windows looking right at the main residence. So I have clear stories, and you can see in the upper right-hand side, and those look up into the trees, and it's beautiful. It's a great connection to the outdoors, making that space feel bigger, but also providing enough light that it feels a lot bigger.
Yeah, and I look at this photo and I imagine this kitchen without that clear story, with an 8-foot flat ceiling, and it's still a kitchen with a lot of built-in storage. It's still a nice kitchen, but it's particularly in a small space. This feels so much bigger because of that high ceiling and that clear story looking out. Even though you're not, the window isn't at eye line, you're being able to look out up into the tree, and it's just expanding that sense of space really effectively.
Yeah, and I can't emphasize, how big a difference those vaulted ceilings make. But there are some times where you've got a flat ceiling and there's a reason for it. So
right. And I think that's commonly for if you do have a vaulted ceiling in your ADU, you often will have a flat ceiling over like a bathroom, that sort of space to provide room for the mechanics that go in the attic or go above.
Yeah,
right? Is that correct?
We have an example of that coming up in one of our slides. So this one is one that's not built yet. It's permitted, but not built. This is a 2-story ADU that started out as a pool house, but now it's an ADU because the rules changed. It was too big at the time it was originally designed. And this is about 1,140 square feet of space, and it can be used. This can be used as just a recreational pool house, or a guest room, or a full ADU. And that shows in the next slide in terms of, this is downstairs. You can see that there's a full kitchen, full dining area, full recreational, television watching, and there's storage. You've got to look for storage.
I can see there's a lot of built-in storage there, and you've done big sliders on both sides to really lengthen those sight lines and bring in the outdoors.
And this one's really fun in that the sliders there, that it's kind of the best of both worlds. That front side is the sun side where the pool is. So you can have al fresco dining out, on a warm summer evening out there. The sliding doors in the back go out to a back deck, and it's a redwood grove that's back there. So
Oh,
it
nice.
couldn't be more different front and back, but we took advantage of that. Again, those French door sliders are great.
And you touched on something early on when we first started talking about with the Murphy bed is, and we see this throughout your designs, is the flexibility of the spaces that get created. We see this when we meet with homeowners all the time, where they're thinking about building an ADU. It may be for a mother-in-law, father-in-law for a while. It may be guest, for the holidays for people to come stay. But long-term, the use of that ADU may change from being housing for family to being a rental to being a space for kids who grow. And I think that designing that into the structure itself, things like Murphy beds, things like these open spaces that can be reconfigured. And I think this particular project is a great example because it could be, it can be an ADU, it can be a pool house, it can be a guest house. All of those uses, there's nothing that stops it from being any of those things as needs change and develop over time. So even in a small space, it's a very flexible space.
Yeah, this is the upper floor to that space, and you can see we have that's the bedroom piece with a full bathroom and storage closets on either side as entrance to the bathroom. And there's another door and entrance, which again creates flexibility in how this space is used. And then we built a dividing wall at the back of the bed, so that actually ends up being an entertainment and or storage area. Again, creating a little bit of flexibility, and there's a little coffee bar up to the left in the upper left-hand corner.
This is such a neat design. I've never seen this in a space this small, where you've got a wall there in the middle of the room that provides separation and probably some acoustical separation, like you were talking about early on, between a sleeping area and a couch, utility area, work from home area, without closing in the space and making two small rooms. It's still going to feel big. It's still going to be an open space, but it does provide that break of use sense in between the two spaces in a really clever way.
And I got this, the glass, as much glass as I can fit on both towards the top of the screen, which looks out into the redwood forest, and out of the bottom, out onto its own deck over the pool.
Right. Yeah, it's a really interesting design, and I think it's a really flexible design.
The next one was a fun one. This was 900, just over 900 square feet. This is a caretaker's cottage at a B&B in town, where the owners wanted to live on site, but they didn't want to be in the main house. They wanted to have their own house. So we designed a small ADU for them. And this is off of the pool. We're looking in to this space, which is the living room. And this is, again, one of those great room conditions. And here again, vaulted ceilings, putting in as much glass as I can. I mean, that's a great view to look out onto the pool from this space. There is a fence that divides the space with gates on it, so that they can have their own private dining patio or leave it open like this and enjoy the view of the pool as well. This
and again,
also,
go ahead.
Well, I said this also has that clear story in the upper right-hand corner. You can just get a glimpse of it. And I think there's another slide of it elsewhere, but yeah, there it is. This one was interesting because on the other side of that wall, not too far away, is a fence, because there's a parking lot there. But that's no reason to not let light into the space. So that's why those clear stories are there. Again, it opens the space up, lets the light in, and that's north light, which is really terrific light in the space.
Yeah, and I think that touches on something that we see a lot. We've met with, I think, 80 homeowners across the two counties in the last 6 months. And with an ADU, you're having to adapt to an already built property. There's a house there, there's a yard, there are only so many good spots to put an ADU in most people's properties. And sometimes the views may not be ideal, like you have in this case, where the view off to the right there is a parking lot. But you don't just wall it off. You don't just make it blank. With a creative solution. And I think it improves the design overall. I mean, if you had the windows at eye line where the other two windows are, you probably wouldn't have gone up in the roof with the roof line there. And that really makes this space more dynamic to me. If it's, with that vaulted ceiling, if it was just a simple vault all the way down, the space would still feel a little simple, a little small. But with that clear story, it really it enlivens the space. It makes it visually interesting. There's more play of light and shadow. There's more room to hang art, which can be hard to do in a small space. And you really adapted the ADU to the specific conditions on site, and that's something that we see, I think, with really well designed ADUs, is that what first seems like a compromise to the site often becomes a feature over the life of the design.
And this next slide, what we did was we bumped out the front door a couple of feet to give a little bit more of a foyer feel to it. And this slide also shows, as you look down that hallway, we're looking into the bedroom, and there's that window down there. Again, it's connecting you to the outside, and it makes the space feel a little bigger, and it's a much nicer walk towards the bedroom because you're being able to look outside and kind of see what's going on during the day. Go ahead.
Yeah, and again, this is one of the, I could say it on every one of your photos, but imagine this space with a flat ceiling without those windows. It would feel very differently. And in with ADUs, when you convert, a garage or an outbuilding, you're allowed to add on 150 square feet for vestibule exit entry. And so, like what you've done here, if the building had been too close to the property line to normally do any footprint change to it, you're allowed to do this kind of vestibule, and it makes the space more livable. I mean, there's a bookcase, there's art. It really signals that this is the entrance to the and exit to the house. It's really effective.
Yeah, thanks. And this is showing that this was for this client, they wanted a full kitchen, and so they've got a full kitchen and a lot of storage. This also, we took advantage of this end closet that's kind of on the left, and that's where their wine center is. So, creatively, it takes a little, hemming and hawing, but you figure it out. Each client is different. Every situation is different. And then I also, you put in, I put in windows at kitchen sinks. I'm sorry, that's just, I feel strongly about it. I try and do it in every one of my projects.
Yeah, having lived in houses that have had them and don't have them, it's really nice to be able to have a window over the sink.
This last one here, this is 1,040 square feet, and this was an existing 3-car garage with a fairly large attic space above it. And what we ended up doing for this client is we took off that upper attic space and made it full height living space, so that nothing's tucked into the eaves down on the first level. And this is a view into that great room concept that I was talking about earlier. Here's the living room. The dining room is off to the left. It's set right next to a big picture window. And there's a full island and the kitchen beyond. And they're all sharing that space. And it makes the space feel really nice.
And I think this one's a really good example of, if you look at the 4 projects we've just seen, they're very different projects. One's a conversion, one's a new build, one's single story, 2-story. Here we have an ADU above a garage, which an ADU above a garage is a really great solution for people who have small lots or tight lots. And we're seeing your principles played out across 4 very different projects, but the principles all still work. The sight lines, the vaulted ceilings, the built-in storage, the blending of indoor-outdoor space really make these small spaces a joy to live in.
Yeah, this is again showing that great room, and that's all storage and display. For this particular owner, they had things that they wanted to display. And then there's storage down below. You can just kind of make it out. The lower half are drawers, storage drawers in that wall on kind of the right of the picture. That big island, there's plenty of storage in there. And that's done intentionally because, it's 1,040 square feet, but everybody's got their stuff. You need a
Yeah,
place to
yeah.
store it.
Well, and I think that that speaks, also to the ADUs in particular when you're working with a smaller space. Every last inch of storage counts. Every last inch of window glazing counts. Small changes can have really big effects in small spaces. I mean, look at this door, this sliding door, and there's a big deck on this one, right? It's
Yeah, it's
500
almost
square feet,
500 square feet of deck out there.
right? So essentially, it's almost half again their living space, and given the climate that we have,
Yeah.
9 months out of the year, it's a joy. Yeah,
So
that's
this was using a sliding glass door system that all the panels slid down towards the bottom of the screen there. And so now, as Scott just mentioned, that 500, 600 square foot great room is now 1,100 because you can walk straight out onto that deck, and it's all one big space for them and their friends and family to enjoy.
yeah,
Worked out really well.
yeah. I think that's a lovely solution to blending indoor outdoor space, and I think that's something that for a lot of ADU hopefuls, people we talk to, incorporating these kinds of design ideas early on, really, they can really add a lot to the livability of the space, the desirability of the space, the future rental value of the space. And it's the kind of thing that is really hard, if not impossible, to fix later on. But designed in at the start with an eye towards small spaces making them livable and lovely, you end up with these great spaces.
I think that's that. Yeah, that's our last slide.
Great. Well, thank you, Ken. It was really, really good to see these spaces and see those principles in action.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
Thank you both so much. That was terrific. I really loved hearing you walk through those slides. I hope everyone, especially those of you who answered to the poll, that you're interested in floor plans, designing floor plans. Super helpful to see those walked through in detail like that, and all those great small space tips. And if folks are interested, we actually have a lot of sample floor plans also in that ADU workbook that we linked to earlier, and also on our website. So with that, thank you again, Kenneth and Scott. And now we're going to turn to some local Healdsburg homeowners who have successfully built accessory dwelling units in Healdsburg. And I think as you walk through the photos of these two beautiful ADUs, you're going to start to see a lot of the design elements that Ken and Scott have discussed here as well. So our first homeowner is Tim Unger, and he is going to start by sharing about his experience building a detached ADU as an owner builder, which he's going to share a little bit about what that experience was like. And you already got to hear a little bit from Tim, but we're going to share his bio here in more detail in the chat. And I think what you're going to learn as you hear from Tim this evening is that you can both have your career in one area, and then Tim somehow has also become quite the expert on accessory dwelling units through his work, and you'll hear a lot about how he learned more as an owner builder. So with that, Tim, thank you so much for joining us, and I'm excited to have you walk through your experience with folks.
Thanks, Renee. First off, I just wanted to say to Scott and Ken, fantastic job. And I'm sure they forgot a whole heck of a lot more than I'll ever know about ADUs. But the first thing I wanted to open with is in comment to a Q&A that was posted by Brenda Newman. If you look at the next slide at the floor plan, you'll see that the washer dryer is located between the bedroom and the bathroom, as you asked a question earlier about washer and dryer. So I wanted to give you a little perspective here. In 2008, my wife Renee and I purchased the land in Healdsburg that we built a home on, and I overtook the owner builder responsibility away from the general contractor just to ensure that we actually ended up with what we wanted. And then taking the experience that we had and the knowledge that we garnered from that, when we decided to expand the property in 2015 through a lot line adjustment and build an ADU, we also did the owner builder approach on that front as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Tim. And I've had the pleasure of visiting Tim and Renee's beautiful accessory dwelling unit space, and I'm so excited that they get to share it with you here this evening. And so with that introduction, let's talk about the details of the construction a little bit, just to set the stage for folks on that detached ADU.
We emphasized volume over area, and we know that having tall ceilings can make a space feel a lot more comfortable and welcoming. And we also really wanted the garden, the Japanese garden, to be the theme, as opposed to having everything be displaced and dwarfed by a much larger ADU, which we of course could have built. And we decided upon 740 square feet because that just happened to be the magic number where we could have an open floor plan and create an inviting space for the guest, while at the same time preserving our desire to have the garden be the focal point.
That's excellent. And you'll see some more images from the landscaping and hear more about that later, but it's really gorgeous and you were very successful with that. And I love that you have that, you know, long-term goal of having a caretaker be able to be there. When you,
Well, if you could let me comment for a minute on that. My wife and I both took care of our respective parents together. And over time, being exposed to the nursing home or third-party care system as we've decided that we would prefer to age in place and structure a situation where we stay in our home and have a caretaker look after us. We hope that plan ends up being realized, but this ADU certainly long-term would give us that best chance.
and I love that, thinking ahead. And we hear from so many homeowners about thinking towards those long-term goals. You know, maybe I'm going to rent the ADU now for passive income and it's going to help me cover my mortgage, for example. But then in the long term, I'm going to be able to age in place by having a caretaker there, or my adult children there, or moving into it and downsizing, which is what our second homeowner we'll hear from shortly did. Thank you for that, Tim.
It might be productive to comment about the timeline here. We lost 2 months due to the heavy rains during that period. And some may look and say that, gee, achieving this in 15 months, where it was a full scraping of the property, all the way through planting and implementing hardscape and landscape. We really had a very focused construction team, which was made up of a couple of friends of mine who were retired construction company owners and I. And the three of us did a significant amount of the work, but we also weren't competing with other customers. The focus was very narrow and pointed just at this project. And I think that contributed to the shorter timeline.
I'm so glad you raised that, Tim, because as I share with folks, you know, we say on average an ADU build is about 1.5 to 2 years. And then when you shared with me how short your timeline was for this detailed, beautiful, detached ADU, I was like, oh gosh, people are going to get the wrong idea that you could do it that quickly. And sometimes you can, but it's so helpful to hear some of those details as to why that was possible.
Right.
That's awesome. Let's hear a little bit about the budget and costs. So share a little bit about that, Tim.
So at the time, and when we knew that 740 square feet was the magic number, and that my wife and I had designed this ourselves and given it to a local architect to put into blueprinting through their CAD software, we knew that what the cost of construction was at the level of finish that we wanted to achieve. And we just did the math and arbitrarily came up with a wet finger in the air of $300,000. The actual spend was about $25K less than that. And the cost per square foot was about $370 a square foot. A noteworthy comment about this design is it's fully ADA compliant, keeping in mind that aging in place is important. The structure's been built to accommodate a wheelchair ramp if necessary. The same thing with the main house. All the doors are wider than normal. There's no curbs in the showers. pocket doors everywhere. And you'll notice that prior to me, Ken Munson spoke to that. And we're happy we were able to achieve that, along with higher countertops and under counter appliances and taller toilets, which are essential.
Thank you for making that shout out about the ADA compliance, Tim. So helpful, so important. Whenever we do consultations with homeowners, we talk to them about universal design and or ADA compliance in their ADU. And I'm so glad you mentioned that. I also want to flag for folks, this project was completed, a little bit ago. Prices per square foot have increased since then. It really does depend on so many factors. Check out our ADU calculator. We say that based on our market research in Napa and Sonoma counties, the cost per square foot for an ADU is between $325 to $425. So this is falling in there, but just want to lift that up for folks. And on that note, let's talk about your financing.
Certainly. One last point about cost. When we built this ADU, our permitting fee was just under $20,000. Since then, the state and the city of Healdsburg has become much more creative and thoughtful about permitting fees. And if you're now under 850 square feet, I believe, you're only paying for inspections and plan check. So you could save a considerable amount of money to help offset those increasing cost per square foot numbers that you just commented on. The financing that we chose to pursue for this was simply through a home equity line of credit through our bank. And the interest rate was so attractive that while we were building it, we adhered to this HELOC, and then we financed it after we received our occupancy certificate. So 2%, very competitive. You can still get 2% rates today on HELOCs.
Thank you for that, Tim. And for folks who are interested in ADU financing, I'll also mention we have a recorded on-demand webinar on the many ways that you can finance your ADU from local experts, which we'll be dropping a link to that in the chat, and it's also available on our website. Thank you for sharing that, Tim. I'm also so glad that Tim brought up the changes. So as of January 2020, so during his build, there were a lot of different factors when it came to development standards, fees, as he mentioned. And thanks to the city of Healdsburg and the state of California, there's now significant shifts in those rules and permit fees that make it a lot easier to build ADUs. So with that, tell us a little bit about your permit process, Tim.
So we went through the city's one-stop process, which was invaluable. That's where you show up down at the planning and a building department, and you sit among functional heads from each department. You've got your building official there and your public works person and your fire people and anybody else that you can imagine sits there, and you present your general plan to them, and then they comment and tell you and advise you as to things you need to pay attention to, provide you with ideas that you might consider, and help you think through this process. And we really got a lot of mileage out of that. And that process still is available today. I can tell you that from my perspective, with a change in city leadership, with a new city manager and some evolution in the staff, things just continue to become better and better. And people building an ADU today I believe are going to be confronted with a formidable process that's easier to navigate and more helpful. There are a couple of people that I'll put a shout out to. One was Barbara Nelson, who's no longer with the staff, who did a great job. The building official, Steve Buffenbarger, in my estimation, is a rock star. He's still on staff, very helpful. And we'll actually come out to the site, talk things through with you. The guy's available by phone. Quite unusual for somebody in his role. He was very, very helpful.
That's so helpful to hear, Tim. And for those of you who want to meet Steve virtually, he actually joined us along with Scott Duvin from the planning department, both of whom are really hands-on, really helpful, and they were our panelists on our part 1 of this webinar series. So feel free to check that out as well. With that, let's talk a little bit about your cost savings approach. In particular, I think the fact that you worked as an owner builder, swung a hammer, and did so many other things. So share about that, because that also helps put a little bit more color onto that final cost for this ADU for folks.
So as an owner builder, that involves procuring material and interfacing and hiring subs and negotiating their contracts and making sure you've got the right insurance coverages. And because general contractors will do a profit markup, and they'll also end up marking up material, whether it's drywall or lumber or your fixtures, you can end up saving between 20 and 25%. And it requires attention to detail, and it's time consuming. But if you've got a flexible schedule and the ability to manage a spreadsheet, and you're not one to shy away from a little conflict every now and then, and you can negotiate, an owner builder could be a good option for some people. And it's certainly, I documented, I think we saved 23%.
That's great.
On the project.
Thank you for sharing that, Tim. And I will point out, being an owner builder is not for the faint of heart. So I don't want to oversell that it's something that all of us would be able to do, especially if you're working a full-time job or don't have any previous experience, but it is doable. So thank you, Tim, for that. All right, I'm going to move us along to talking about building. And I've gotten us a little bit behind time, Tim, just to give you a sense of the timing, but I want you to share with folks a little bit about this piece.
Sure. So we did a crawl space, concrete foundation. Framing was 2x6, where typically you do 2x4. The reason why we did 2x6 was twofold. One, we wanted to recess the windows. And this design that we used is really a 25% replica of the main house. So it was easy to transition over to this other design. By using the 2x6 framing, we were also able to add additional insulation and sound attenuation. Drywall is a level 5 finish, so it's smooth. We used Rick Jones, who's a local drywaller out of Healdsburg. Stucco was Petaluma plastering. We used a smooth finish, which was also a synthetic finish. All LED lighting, Benjamin Moore paint. Lighting was procured through Corday Lighting in Santa Rosa. Our utilities we tied into the main house, and one of the things that came out of the one stop, when I asked what can we do to save money, they said if you tie your utilities in the main house, you can avoid hookup fees, and also in some cases have fewer meters. So that's something to think about if you're considering building an ADU. Fire sprinklers were done by Conrad's Fire, which were mandatory with a standalone ADU. And of course, the neighborhood in which we live is considered historic in nature. We also did pocket doors all around. Sorry about this. This isn't a bullet on this, Renee. And we used solid cherry pocket doors, and the hardware we used was Hefla out of Germany. Kenny Munson referenced earlier, used the best pocket doors you can use, and that's the best hardware that's really available in the market. It's expensive, but it's flawless.
That's really helpful. Thank you for those detailed tips. Really appreciate it, Tim. Let's hear very briefly about the details. And I think that Amity's going to paste them in here too. So just very briefly on the details for folks.
So the appliances, as I mentioned, were all under counter. They consisted of Fisher Paykel and Wolf and Uline for the wine chiller, KitchenAid dishwasher. Again, for Brenda Newman's edification, our washer dryer was Electrolux, and I don't think there's a photo of that, but as I said earlier on the floor plan, it's located between the bedroom and the bathroom. Cabinets were custom made and designed by Rigo's Custom Cabinets out of Geyserville. This is an interesting point. If you have your cabinets built north of Healdsburg, you are not responsible for using water-based finishes. You can use the real stuff like conversion varnish, which will preserve your wood and maintain the luster of your cabinets without having to refinish them in 5 years. And he's located behind Catelli's, right up there in Geyserville. Again, level 5 finishes, and we put in a Mitsubishi mini split system, HVAC. You'll see that white box in the upper left-hand corner above the two pieces of art there. That's actually a heating and air conditioning system. It's ductless, and it's about half the price of a conventional ducted system.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing those details, Tim. So helpful. Tell us about your beautiful landscaping, which I wish everyone could have the pleasure of seeing in person as well.
So the whole architectural design and motif is Japanese in nature, and certainly the garden, which is the focus piece here, is that this structure you see in the background is a pergola designed to be a replica of a Japanese tea house. And all the plants are drought tolerant, and we've got a minimal drip system, which keeps the water usage down. Very low maintenance. The plants are very low maintenance. You'll see those redwood trees in the background. They've probably doubled in size since we were fortunate enough to purchase this property, and we look forward to them continuing to mushroom, providing a lot of good shade.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tim. Tell us your final tips.
Be patient. One of the things that was a real advantage in working with the subs is I never pushed them on a schedule. And that way they weren't able to push back and encourage us to cut corners. So we ended up getting exactly what we wanted. As Renee mentioned, being an owner builder is not for the faint of heart, but there are some of you out there in ADU land that might be willing to take that on. And it's certainly a way to save some money. I had a lot of fun doing this. The friends of mine that worked with me on this, I was able to convince them in closing, Renee, to come do the job and come out of retirement. If I cooked them breakfast and lunch every day, and we kept the day's work to 7 hours, which is what we did. But it was a lot of great camaraderie, and my wife and I are very happy with the outcome. And I just want to say in closing, I'm thrilled to be working with your organization, Renee. I think you were doing a tremendous service for the community, and 2040 and the city of Healdsburg are fortunate to have you helping the way you are.
That is so wonderful to hear, Tim, from a homeowner. We are here to serve homeowners, so it's really great to hear that, and we are here to help all of you. So thank you, Tim, for sharing that wonderful experience, that whole process. It's incredible to hear. Really, I find it empowering to see someone who's done this successfully and under much more difficult circumstances in terms of, not much more, but things have just gotten easier and easier is what I want to say when it comes to local rules, state law, and all of that. So very wonderful and inspiring to hear, Tim. Thank you so much. And thank you to 2040. Let's hear from another homeowner in Healdsburg, Adele Barnett. So Adele, thank you for joining us. Feel free to unmute and bring up your video. And Amity has shared a bio there about Adele. And Adele, let's dive right in and hear about your ADU build experience by talking first about setting the stage, your property and your timeline. And if you want to share a few words on what inspired you as well to build this ADU.
Well, we always planned that we would build an ADU on this property, but it was way off in the future. And things happened a little bit quicker. My husband passed away. So I needed a way to stay in Healdsburg. And one of the ways was to build an ADU. And we already lived in a small house. So, but it had 2 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. And we thought it would bring more money and I could pay for my mortgage and live here in the ADU, which I adore. It feels so big. It has vaulted ceilings and French doors that open out to a 200 square foot patio or porch. And so that can open up. I have a 7-foot table in the house that can seat 8 to 10 people. So I feel like I have enough room to do everything. I have a a kitchen, full kitchen, and a stackable full-size washer and dryer, 2 bathrooms, though small, and lots of storage, a hallway down where the washer and dryer and the second bathroom are. There's lots of cabinets and storage. So
Thank you, Adele. Yeah, it's so beautiful, your ADU. And for folks who haven't seen it, we actually have a bunch of these photos that you see on this slide also featured on our website, sharing Adele's story. So you can see the kitchen that she's describing, the porch, and we're going to see some more photos there in a second. And with that, tell us a little bit about the budget and costs, Adele.
well, I had $300,000 to work with for my husband's left behind for me, and that's what I had to stick to. And there were lots of things that came up. I had a project manager who was part of the construction team, plus a myriad of friends who were in the business. And at one point, even a retired city planner came down to give me help. I wish you'd have been around, Renee, because I needed somebody to ask, but I had to put a new sidewalk in front of the house and take down a 60-foot tree and all of that before I could even start building.
It's so helpful to hear those kind of concrete, real world things that come up. And I know you're going to share with us a little bit more about some of those surprises in a second. You've hit on the financing piece. I want everyone to take a second to look at this beautiful photo, looking from your kitchen out onto that porch that you described, which my understanding from talking to you, Adele, is that that porch made it possible. You really wanted to be able to host dinner parties still when you moved
Exactly.
to that place, right?
Exactly. And so we have porch parties, but leave the doors open, and then all the food and stuff is inside and there's the big table you can see. So I'm able to have large parties. Plus there's room in front of the porch that people can wander out on and sit around. And then my garden, I don't know if you can see the garden, which is part of a French drain and a swale, which words I never knew what they meant, but it was for drainage of the water off of the property. Then that had to go in order for the rainwater to collect and go down and stay on the property as long as as much as it could. So then I was able to plant around that, because it's like a little rock, almost a river, except it's not, but it looks like when it's all rock, and then around it I have grasses and different kind of perennials and lavender. So it's a pretty little garden, which
I'm going to show you all a photo of that beauty there at the end. But also it reminds me of one of my favorite things about your project, Adele, which is that you really thought through on the front end, okay, what is it that matters most to me in doing this downsizing from my main house into an ADU? And how can I make sure that my designer designs this to have really important to me to have 2 bathrooms, even in a small space. So we've got 1.5 bathrooms, really important to have that open floor plan, space for parties. That porch makes that even more possible. Things like that. Tell us a little.
This door goes out to the back too, right there that you're seeing in the picture. And that's the washer and dryer. And then there's a little desk here and more storage along that. So
tell us a little more, Adele, about that permit process to make that possible.
Well, I didn't know what I was doing. My son-in-law, who lives in Sonoma, who gets planning stuff done all the time, came over, and it was a lot different in Healdsburg. And you have to remember, we were the pioneers of going in and getting permits, and we had to pay a lot more than everybody else paid. Eventually, they gave us half of it back. So for me, it was difficult because I didn't know what they were doing, and I would have people go in, but it was difficult. But then people started working with me more and more, and it became very simple, and they were gracious and wonderful and came out and helped me, pass all of the inspections and stuff. So yeah, it was great.
That's wonderful. And you shared with me you would go down to the permit office and
Well,
you had some guidance and you ended up having a wonderful ADU as a result. To that end, tell
exactly.
us about the building just a little bit.
Oh, the building of it? Is that what you mean?
Exactly.
Yeah, I had, like I said, I had a project manager and he hired all the subcontractors. But since I lived right next to it, and I mean right next to it, I was there every day and I was able to pick out a lot of the stuff. So I feel like I was really involved with it and made decisions right on at the moment. So, and it was a plan that I'd had in my head forever. And I just told my son-in-law, this is what I want. He's a designer and does all the blueprints and all of that. So I got all of that from him for free. So that helped a lot. And so we just went through and I show him pictures from Pinterest and everything else to say, this is what I want. And it turned out to be exactly what I want, if not better.
I love that. That's wonderful. And by the way, I know you had a surprise with not realizing until a little later on in the project that a firewall would be needed. And that
Exactly.
time,
Because the house is so close to the other house. I think it's 5 feet at one point. So they had to take out all the windows in one room at the main house. And I couldn't have any windows along this side. So I wasn't able to have the window over my sink. I had to put in fire walls and they had to be, the fire department had to make sure. So it's a good thing, and I had to have sprinklers too. And now I don't think you have to have sprinklers in a house this size, but it's good. We went through enough fire stuff. So I'm glad we have the firewalls.
well,
But
I love just telling people, there are going to be unexpected things that come up on your ADU project. And part of getting through a successful ADU build is surprises coming up. And I actually did reach out just recently to the city of Healdsburg to ask about how could a homeowner, mitigate maybe having a surprise firewall, for example, and that one-stop meeting, if you're able to go in there on the front end and have a sense of your design and the placement of the ADU is something that's going to help folks avoid some of those surprises. On the other hand, again, surprises are going to come up and it's okay. And in our ADU feasibility consultations as well, we'll be able to also give you a heads up about things like that at step 0, which we hope are helpful for folks. Let's talk briefly about your cost saving tips, Adele.
Oh, well, I had all my cabinets and stuff were from Home Depot, and they have a kitchen place that just designs everything for you. And so I did that. Instead of putting granite in, I put in Formica that looks like granite. So it's hard to tell that it's not, it's black. So those are the kind of places I went to save money. And picking out the flooring, making sure I got a good sale on it. It's all, what's it called? The wooden type flooring, but it's not wood. Anyway, that's
I love that you're looking around your home as you're.
I know, I was trying to see what it's all in one room. So I do have one grand room, and it's the living room and the kitchen and the dining room and then the porch. So it's a big space for 640 square feet.
And behind you are curtains, which are blocking off that bedroom.
This bedroom. I was going to put barn doors, but they would have been so heavy. And I like the ability to keep these curtains open. And when I'm at home, it just makes the house look so much bigger. And then there's a little bathroom off the shower bathroom off this bedroom.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, let's go through, you've talked about this, so let's not get into the details again, but I really just wanted folks to be able to see this beautiful photo of your kitchen and see how well it's designed in a small space with an open floor plan with that dining room table, as you can see there in that lower left-hand corner, and those open shelves there. But let's look at this photo that you alluded to earlier, which I think is, yes.
Oh, that's the
beautiful
garden.
landscape.
And I don't know if you can see the rocks going down at where
Yeah.
that collects water.
Yeah. And you can see that gorgeous front porch that you have there, and how it opens out from that main room of your ADU.
At one point, they wanted me to drain the swale if it went over into the street, but I would have had to have barreled into the sidewalk. And it was like, whoa, I just put that sidewalk in. So I went to a engineer and he came up with a better idea and they all accepted it and it was fine.
Well, it's beautiful, and I'm so glad that you were able to share it with folks. So final thoughts.
It's not as hard as you'd think. I mean, at the time, it seems like it's just a lot of men around doing construction, dirt and all that kind of stuff. So if you can put up with that, if you live on the property, it's not that bad. And you can always call Tim if you need help.
I love it.
Tim helped me out so much. I can't tell you. He was great help for me.
I love that. I love hearing neighbors helping neighbors. And that's what you have done by coming on this webinar this evening as well. So thank you so much, Adele. I love your ADU story, and I really know that it's inspiring to others. So we appreciate it. I'm going to share with everyone a few quick resources, and then we're going to dive into our Q&A. Now is the time for you to start entering your questions into that Q&A chat, which we're going to tackle with all of our panelists here in a minute. So if you haven't entered any questions that have come up for you yet throughout the course of this webinar, now is the time. And with that, really briefly, a little bit about more ADU resources. I've mentioned some of these. Amity's going to paste them into the chat for you. Our ADUs 101 webinar, highly recommend that. Really helpful overview of the ADU process. Similarly, our Building ADUs in Napa and Sonoma Counties webinar, another really helpful resource. And then how to finance your ADU. So we have a bunch of other on-demand recorded webinars. You can check them out on our website. And then we also have a bunch of blog posts and FAQs available that we've linked to there as well. And then I also mentioned we have Adele's story featured on our website, and we have stories from other local homeowners across Napa and Sonoma counties who have successfully built accessory dwelling units as well. So please feel free to check those out on our website if you're interested in hearing more. And with that, just one quick note on our upcoming webinar, May 6th. It's a ADU design roundtable with local experts. So building on our conversation this evening. So feel free to check that out, and you can register there on our website, and also again, view our past webinars. Okay, with that, I'm going to invite all of our panelists to come back together for a Q&A session. Folks, please feel free to start typing in your questions in that chat. And I am going to introduce our additional panelist who's joining us for this Q&A this evening, Josh Abrams. So Josh Abrams is a statewide expert on ADU law and policy, principal at Baird and Driscoll Community Planning. He and his firm built a lot of the wonderful ADU tools that you see on our website, like the calculator tool, the ADU workbook, and partner with us on a lot of the work that we're currently doing in partnership with local jurisdictions as well. So thank you so much for joining us, Josh. And I'm so excited to have everyone here. If you don't know in Zoom how to bring up your gallery view, now's the time. So you can see all of the panelists' bright shining faces as we answer your questions. So with that, I actually have a question that I'm going to direct towards Scott to kickstart us. And this was pre-submitted in advance. So this question is, when designing and constructing an ADU, what things, if any, do you have to avoid to inadvertently result in a reassessment of the entire property? For instance, if you upgrade utility service to the property, could that trigger a reassessment?
That's a great question. And I'll do a short answer, long answer on this one. The short answer is talk to the county assessor. They're very helpful about these kinds of issues. And when it comes to property taxes for an ADU, if you build an ADU, the assessor is only going to reassess on the new construction. For the people who this person's asking the question, sort of one step beyond that. So when you build an ADU, they don't reassess the whole property. However, if you do improvements to the area that isn't the ADU, for example, replacing your electrical panel, building a long driveway, those kinds of things, better drainage, some of those things, some of those land improvements or existing house improvements, if they get over a certain level, a certain value, that may trigger a reassessment. And the assessors, like I say, the assessors have been very helpful in answering our questions when we've gone to them with homeowner questions. And they've said, if homeowners do have questions, to reach out and talk to them. Something as small as electrical panel is not going to trigger reassessment. Even something that's slightly more than that is unlikely to trigger reassessment. If you do a 300-foot long asphalt driveway and a lot of site improvements with retaining walls and drainage, yeah, that's probably going to trigger some kind of reassessment for the property. But it's a pretty high bar to get to that.
Super helpful.
Renee, can I add in that if your main property is reassessed, it's not like, oh, your old property tax Prop 13 values thrown out. It's just the improvements that would be would then have a higher tax rate. So yeah, like the new electrical, new roof, those might just be routine maintenance. But let's say you just redid your kitchen at the same time that you did the ADU. Yeah, there would be an assessment just associated with the increased value because of the new kitchen. But the majority of that tax, the low tax that perhaps you're enjoying now, would stay the same.
Thank you for that, Josh and Scott. Really helpful. Okay, this might be a question for Scott as well. We have an outbuilding that has a half bath, no other plumbing, and we were told by the previous owner that we would need to get a use permit. Can someone speak more to that, and is that the right approach?
Yeah, the fundamental question is, did they have a permit putting that half bath in the first place? And the two answers there, the assumption is no, they didn't have a permit. And in that case, you are going to have to go back and try and get either remove that plumbing and then get new plumbing put in as a permit. Sometimes if the work was documented really well, if they had photos of what the trench looks like for the half bath to the shed, you can often, provided that you bring it up to current code, you may be able to get that permitted now. But in most cases where you have something that may not be permitted or was not permitted, you can check with the city if there's a permit on file for it. But if it's not permitted, it's usually easiest to sort of take it out, start from scratch, and build it to the current code.
Thank you for that, Josh. Or Scott. Sorry, Scott. Okay, Ken, your second ADU, you showed us what appeared to be a shed attached to the side. Does that count as part of the overall square footage? Does it make a difference if you can enter the storage space from inside the ADU? Key question there. Do you have thoughts on that?
That was, no, it's not included in that ADU size. That was pool equipment. And it's unconditioned space.
Great.
And we're not going above, Healdsburg has a 1,200 square foot limit, and we were below all of that at 1040 for the conditioned space, and the pool equipment doesn't count against you.
And if you had a door that was a door between the ADU and the storage space, that would change things.
Yeah, it might. I'm not sure. This wasn't, again, it wasn't storage. It was an equipment space, pool equipment space. There is a half bath that was a part of that, but that was included in the square footage. Got
it. Scott, can you speak to that question of what is included in the square footage as well?
Yep. And if you've seen any of the other webinars, this is one of my it depends answers. It depends on who's asking the question. For the purposes of permitting your ADU, for getting the building permit, the planning and building department are only concerned with conditioned space, as Ken said. So that's sheetrock insulated, heated and cooled, traditional indoor conditioned space. Utility spaces, such as if it had been storage, Ken, those are not counted by planning and building for the purposes of an ADU building permit. However, the fire department will count those areas for the purposes of whether or not you need sprinklers. And if you go over a certain size, typically 50% of the existing house, if you go over a certain square footage, then you will need to install sprinklers if the main house doesn't already have them. So that's where I say it depends on who's asking the question. Fire calculates it one way, and building and planning calculate it another. But for most people, in most cases, it's just the air conditioned and heated space inside the ADU.
And we were going to have to fire sprinkler. There was going to be a new house and the ADU. It would all be sprinklered. If it had an original house that was not sprinklered, and we were building the ADU is not required to be sprinklered. Again, given the caveat of not exceeding 50%.
And sometimes those fire sprinkler questions can get very detailed and specific. And so that one-stop meeting is so great because the fire department is present and they're the ones that can help you understand on the front end about that piece. And it is, as has come up with Tim and Adele, the fire sprinkler thing, it can be significant added cost. So it's really good, again, to go to the city with that one-stop meeting on the front end to make sure you understand the specifics for your project. Adele, go ahead, Scott.
And I was going to say, and to ensure that you do that one-stop meeting pretty early on in your process. All you need is a scaled site plan of your property and a floor plan sketch of your project. And if you have that, that's enough to be able to schedule a one-stop meeting. That way, the design is still fluid enough that you can make significant changes if there is an issue that gets brought up by the city without having already spent all of your design budget.
Thank you, Scott. And for those of you who are joining us from outside of the city limits of Healdsburg, so unincorporated Sonoma County or other jurisdictions, Healdsburg is the only jurisdiction I'm aware of that has this one-stop meeting. However, like many jurisdictions, if not all, really are very open and available and want you to come in and talk to them at square one about your plans. You can bring in a hand sketch drawing. We actually have in our ADU workbook a list of questions to ask the planning department on the front end. So definitely communicate early on is the takeaway there, regardless of the jurisdiction you're in. And in Healdsburg, take advantage of the one-stop. Adele, I have a question for you. Someone wants to know, Adele, can you tell us about the engineer who helped with the water issue in your landscaping?
It was Hogan Engineer in Santa Rosa, and they were incredible to work with. And so I would go to them and they would redraw things for me to make things work that the city was requiring. So it's Hogan Engineering.
Thank you for that, Adele.
Mm-hmm.
So I have another question here. So this might be a question for Scott or Kenneth. You also might have thoughts. Are there requirements for garage carport for new ADUs? And is paving required for driveways leading to an ADU, or can natural materials be utilized?
I can speak with authority about the parking. In Healdsburg, no new parking is required for an ADU. Even if you convert a garage or convert a covered parking space into an ADU, you don't need to replace it. You don't need to add parking if you add an ADU. It's just not required. And it used to be a big stopping point for most people. Regarding the paving, I don't believe that paving is required. That's actually, I think, an engineering question, unless Ken or Tim, if you have Healdsburg specific information on that.
Yeah, they typically want an apron of concrete, and you could have permeable concrete, so it could be concrete that lets the water through. But if you had a gravel interior driveway internal to your lot, what the city doesn't want is the car tracking the gravel out onto the sidewalk. So they have a drive-off area that's typically, I think it's about 10 or 12 feet as a requirement for this drive-off area. But I've used, we use crushed granite up in some parking areas for the properties, and the city had no problem with it.
Excellent. So helpful to have that specific local knowledge, Kenneth. Thank you. Okay, we have another question here. This is a question about property taxes, and I'm going to direct it to you, Josh. So if I spend $250,000 on my ADU, would I expect a 1.1% increase in property tax of $2,650 per year?
I would say
sorry.
not exactly. There's a couple of different ways that the assessors decide how much, but more typically they'll look at how much increases the value of your house. So, and usually if you spend $250,000 on an ADU, it won't increase the value of your house $250,000. Like every construction project, right? You get to live there, but it's not dollar for dollar. So for the most part, what assessors tend to do is they'll look at the increased value and increase your taxes based on that. So if you had said, yeah, will if my ADU will increase the value of my house 250,000, will my taxes increase by 1.1% times that per year? Then the answer would have been yes, but not exactly on construction cost. And then there was a second one. There's a second assessment question. Should we do that one at the same time?
Yeah, go for it, Josh.
Do you remember what it was?
It looks like it might have been. Isn't any space that wasn't livable now considered taxable? So
Well,
if garage and now living, it could be taxable.
yeah, I mean, every space was taxable. Every space is taxable. So if you convert a garage, let's say your property was worth $800,000 with a house and a garage, and let's say you convert the garage, so now it's worth $900,000, and maybe it would have been worth $950,000 if you had built a freestanding ADU, because there's a little bit of value in having that garage, but there's obviously more value in having that ADU. So yeah, it was taxable before, but your house will be worth more now. So there'll be more value that'll be taxed. So in that way, if you just do a home conversion, like convert part of your rooms or an attic or unfinished space, that'll increase your home less than a new detached ADU. Well, downside is when you go to sell it, you don't get as much. Upside is that you won't pay as much in taxes every year.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Josh. Adele, another question for you. Did you meet or stay in your budget?
I did stay within my budget. It was, I mean, the extra $75,000 was a little tough, but building the house, I stayed within the budget. Yeah, I was really strict with that. I worried more about going over budget, so I was glad I was there every day.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for that, Adele.
Mhm.
And I also wanted to point out to folks that I've dropped into the chat a link to a blog post that gets into the impact on taxes of ADUs and some specifics for Napa and Sonoma counties. We have a question. Yes, Tim.
I just wanted to add to the tax assessor's question. When you submit your permit, you're going to be asked to put an estimated cost or value of the project. And, this is supposed to be an educated guess as opposed to an arbitrary super low guess. The building official has a table that he'll use based on square footage and what you're doing to the property and in this particular case to the ADU, and they'll estimate what the value is. You can have your conversation with the assessor about that. I posted Crystal Ipson's contact information. She is very reasonable. She's got a staff that wants to work with people. You're not going to be assessed in this particular case equal to what you would be assessed if you had just purchased a new property. They're pretty reasonable, and I'm trying to remember Joyce asked that question. When you go through the process, you'll have to estimate, the value of your project, and then the city will work with you to kind of eyeball that a little more accurately, and that'll give you an idea of what the value will be in the end.
Scott, do you have anything else that you want to add to that?
Yeah, I added a little bit to the in writing in that, yeah, there's a process involved at both the city and the assessor's level, and they do it with every property. So determining value is, it's not an arbitrary process in the sense that they look at surrounding information of similar projects, making a determination. And this is where something the assessor has really stressed on me. They make a determination on the value of the construction, not the cost, on the value of the construction, and that's based on multiple similar projects in the area, information from the building department, information from engineering department, in order to determine. It's not simply an assessor saying, oh, I think this is worth 300 grand and going from there. There is a real strict process to that.
Thank you. Thank you all so much. This has been so incredibly helpful. We've answered all of our homeowner questions for the evening. So thank you all for your wonderful questions. I saw that there were some questions asked and answered in writing about modular and prefab. We cover some good, helpful information on prefab and modular in our ADUs 101 webinar that we dropped a link to the recording in the chat earlier. So check that out. As a reminder, the Napa Sonoma ADU Center is here to help you throughout your ADU process. Here's our contact information. Go to our main page. There's a contact us button in the upper right-hand corner. Click on that, enter all your questions, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. And with that, we just want to say a huge thank you to our supporters, Napa Valley Community Foundation, Community Foundation Sonoma County, to our partners in Healdsburg 2040, to the city of Healdsburg, and to all of you for joining us this evening. Please, again, be in touch. And again, Healdsburg 2040, it's so wonderful to have a nonprofit or to have a group of folks in Healdsburg who are doing this wonderful work around housing. I hope you all check out more about Healdsburg 2040 if you're not familiar with them. It was wonderful to have you, Kenneth and Tim, joining us from Healdsburg 2040 this evening. Adele, it was so special to be invited into your home and your story. Thank you so much. And thank you to all of our panelists for joining us this evening. So with that, there's going to be an anonymous survey that pops up right after we close this webinar. Please answer it, give us your feedback, and please be in touch with us. Thank you all so much again, and have a wonderful evening.
Thanks, everybody.